Hey, this is Steve Halleck of TikToking. As always, you can find me at Steve Halleck on Instagram. You can find me at TikToking.com. You can find my podcast. It's the TikToking podcast. It's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, on a couple other podcast apps. And you can always find my email and hit me up if you're looking for a really cool watch. And today I have a really cool watch. This is the Cabestan SnakeNera. So Cabestan is a brand that was started in the mid-2000s, and actually much of the technical development was done by Vianney Halter. And it is now, this is more or less its second model, which is basically mechanically similar in most ways to the first. So the first was called the winch tourbillon, and it had the crystal was split here, and it didn't have this moonphase, which we'll get into. But in general, the kind of foundational elements of this brand were this big chain and fusée here and vertical tourbillon here. And so these carry over to this model, but you have a couple other pretty cool elements here that we are obviously going to go over. So first, let's go back to basics. We've got hours and minutes on these big cylinders here. This is a jump hour, so it doesn't, screw you up and get halfway in between the 11 and 12 right now. It's 11:31, and really easy to tell time. It's just these red triangle indicators. These are luminous. All of the paint markings that you see are luminous paint, so it's really easy to read at night as well. And this is kind of a theme that I'm going to hit a lot of times with this watch. One of the most surprising things to me, I had never even seen one of these in person before I bought it, and one of the most surprising things is how wearable and how usable this watch is, which is not the first thing you would think when you look at this crazy beast, but you'll see when I put it on the wrist and as I go through it. So it is luminous, it's got the jump hour, it's actually really easy to read. Down here you have a vertically oriented tourbillon, and it has a cylinder attached to it with the seconds written out, so this is your running seconds counter. Over on this side, you have, everybody's favorite constant force mechanism, the chain and fusée. If you want to know a little bit more about how the chain and fusée actually work, check out my video on the Breguet La Tradition tourbillon. So I'm not going to go over it again here because I talked about it a little bit there. But in general, this chain wraps around this cone and provides a constant force mechanism in between the barrel and the timekeeping here. So first thing you may say is, where's the crown? How do you wind it? How do you set it? How the hell does this thing work? So these things here are actually the crowns, and this is a big difference from the first, which they call the vertical winch tourbillon, their first model. In their first model, it had this big buckle, and inside the buckle was a little winch, like an actual tool, and you had to put that tool in and crank it in order to wind this thing up. Now, there's definitely something a little bit cool about that, but it's not the most practical thing. So instead, they've come up with this system that's unlike anything I've ever seen. These actually unfold and become little handles, and they pull out this crown. And so this crown winds the watch. So we're gonna wind it up here. This cylinder it's connected to is the power reserve. So you'll see it wind up. And then something pretty cool, which I didn't realize until I actually owned the watch, is that the snake, which I'll talk about in a minute, the head of the snake is the arrow indicator for the power reserve. So there you can see it's full. It's a 72-hour power reserve. And you can see that head of the snake is exactly in line with these red arrows here. So these are all your indicators. And I thought that was pretty neat that it's actually got a practical use. So let's talk about this snake. This is a very special limited edition. I mean, they're all limited editions. This company makes, I think, maybe like 15 or 20 pieces a year. It's incredibly, incredibly small. But even more sort of special is this piece with this handcrafted snake that winds its way through the movement. And it's really, really cool. I mean, obviously one of the main things about this, the Cabestans are the sort of three-dimensional architecture and all these moving gears of the watch. And to kind of wind a snake through it just accents this design element. And the snake itself is just really, really beautifully manufactured. It's all made by hand. It's white gold. It's hand engraved and hand finished. And it's just, it's pretty spectacular. Now, it is winding itself mainly around this ball, and this ball is actually a gigantic three-dimensional moon phase. So obviously the white part is the full moon, the black part is the new moon, and we're a little bit less than halfway into the cycle here. So you can see that moon phase. Now the moon phase is adjusted via a pusher right here, and the time is adjusted via another crown right here that's, similar to the winding crown there. So that's kind of the basics on how the watch works. It has, I think, just shy of 1,000 parts. This is an incredibly complicated mechanism. It's got a lot going on. It's definitely fulfills the sort of Rube Goldbergian fantasy that we all have with our little micro machines. This is like the ultimate micro machine, and that continues over on the back. The finishing is very, very nice. The layout is just really cool. It accentuates all of the kind of best factors of this movement. The chain is extremely prominent. The vertical tourbillon is very prominent, and everything is laid out so that the watch can actually be used. This particular piece is in titanium, and now we're gonna get to my favorite things about this, and that is that they kind of, I don't know if they actually copied, but it in many ways is similar on the wrist to a Richard Mille, which if you've seen any of my RM videos, I think is probably the most comfortable watch in the world to wear, and they kind of mimic that with this. It's got an almost similar case if you ignore these sort of bulges, and the case curves here at the bottom, and it's on this rubber strap. Came with a few straps, but I really like this rubber, especially with the titanium case. And it's actually not nearly as big as you would think it is. So let me put it on the wrist, and you can see just how it hugs the wrist and how it's sort of a pretty reasonable size. I recently took a trip and decided to bring this watch with me, mainly just because it was so comfortable. It's just a nice watch to wear for the weekend. So here you go. Nice deployant. It works well. It doesn't dig into the wrist or anything like that. It's sort of very small as far as deployants go. But here you can see it's not tall particularly. It's not actually that wide. It's not even that thick. It's a pretty reasonable size, and it really hugs the wrist. I mean, you can see there. Lost my tripod. You can see there. It's form fit almost exactly to my wrist, and it's fairly light and really just clings to the wrist. It's a watch that begs to be worn, which is, I have to admit, not what I expected at all when I bought it. I really thought that this was going to be sort of like a Safe Queen type of watch because it's so kind of crazy looking, and in my mind it was going to be much bigger and bulkier. But when I got it, I just sort of immediately put it on my wrist and was pleasantly surprised. So anyway, this is one that you guys obviously are not going to see often. I had never seen one myself, so I'm really happy to be able to show it to you, and I'm really, really impressed with it. I can't wait to see what else this brand does, and that's it. This is the Cabestan SnakeNera. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon.